Are you craving that $10 cheese box on your next airline flight? We'll talk about what we eat in the air on this episode of Aviation Intrigue.
This is aviation intrigue.
It seems like it's always a struggle when you fly, no matter what you do to find proper food.
It really is between the onboard overpriced little pieces of cheese or a free microscopic bag of pretzels after you've already had three of them on your last connection. It is hard to find good things to eat while flying, and it turns out that pilots struggle the same way.
Yeah, so it's interesting you say that because I think I read a story where one of the major airlines saved a lot of money by eliminating one olive from the packet or something like that.
Yes, Fred. For those of you who travel often, you've probably noticed that over time the portions got smaller and the prices went up, and that has a lot to do with budgeting. And I always wondered, well, what are the airline pilots eating? Are they also getting peanuts, pretzels, and cheese boxes, or are they faring any better?
And so we called and talked to some of the airline pilots, and the answers were kind of interesting.
They were pretty wide ranging, although universally everybody says, yeah, when you're on the go and you travel for your job, it can be pretty tough. And we'll talk about the terminals, but in terms of airline pilots, a couple of them told me that they can carry just a big enough cooler, personal cooler or lunch bag to stuff with as much as they can picking up on their travels. But I wonder if sometimes those are just more peanuts, pretzels, and potato chips.
Yeah, so, I did not realize this, but apparently the pilots flying in the front are not allowed to go eat the food that's there for the passengers. So they cannot have the pretzels and peanuts that are reserved for the passengers.
I just wonder that that maybe they wouldn't want them anyway because they're tired of riding in the jump seats and maybe or the in the back seat and in the cabin, and maybe they've had their fill for it. But I know that carrying things as you go is crucial, and we'll talk about when you're flying, you got to have portable food.
So on the higher end of things, we talked to a couple of people who fly for these non-traditional carriers, let's just say, and sometimes they have catered food. So when they're flying international in particular, so just like we get our catered food on board a airplane, like when you're going abroad, the pilots also get it, the crew also get it. So in that case, perhaps there is some level of decent food that they're getting, decent drinks they're getting.
Possibly, when you fly internationally, as you and I know, the food is a little bit better because the flights are so long. They do have to serve full meals. Of course, they're still a little bit smaller and not quite as good as you get at home. But the airline pilots are going to have some kind of catering as well on those long legs. And so, if you're on a special diet, though, you're going to have to plan that ahead of time too.
Yeah, I'm a vegetarian, and I remember those days. One of the things I had to do while booking airplane trips is to also request special meals. And I know if you're on a diabetic meal or a kosher meal, you have to request a special meal. But these days, it doesn't matter. You get a bag of pretzels and the three tiny pieces of cheese anyway.
So you can't book a flight and say, "Hey, I'm gluten free, absolutely for a medical reason," or "I'm a vegetarian or a kosher." They don't pay attention to those requests anymore.
They do only for international flights because that's where the meals are. I'm not sure if they're the long um, flights from, like, say, New York to LA, they still have it or not. I think it's mostly a first class thing. In the coach class, you still have to purchase or bring your own food. Things have changed. I remember those days when airlines served full food. In fact, in our episode with Gretchen, who is a flight attendant for a major carrier, she talked about how even in a 30-minute flight or an hour flight, they would, you know, hurry up and serve everybody.
Yeah, that's amazing that they used to do that, and you can pick up vintage airline china that they used to serve. Real dishes and real silverware and glasses. These are quite the novelty because they're a really good quality, but a really small size for an airline. It's amazing that they used to do that, and nowadays I just bring my own food. That the security lines, they don't seem to care that you come in with food as long as you don't have that restricted amount of liquid in your baggage. You can bring your own sandwiches and snacks and things like that. And I'm sure they've become more tolerant because of the lack of full meals on a lot of flights.
I think that's right because you don't get a real meal aboard the plane. Therefore, either you're bringing food from home or from the airport that you bought. I My personal opinion is that if it's not liquid food, they're okay. Sometimes, and this has happened to me, that if you have the food wrapped up in an aluminum foil, they make you open it. I'm guessing that the aluminum foil prevents their X-ray machines from seeing what's inside. That's my guess. But if you have it in a clear plastic bag or separate like lunch boxes or something like that, they usually let you go as long as it's not like liquid, like soup or something.
Are you speaking from personal experience? I've never tried to take aluminum foil on a security line.
If you either take homemade burritos or airport bought burritos, I guess in the airport they don't wrap it up in aluminum foil. At home we do, and sometimes they make you open it. Um,
I've never tried to take a burrito on an airline, but that we'll talk about that next. Why I don't.
yeah, but speaking of, since you don't get good food in the airplane, but the airport food has gotten very expensive, and especially after COVID, many of the restaurants don't even exist, or they operate in a very tight hours during the day.
Well, I traveled during that time, and probably 3/4 of the food outlets at even a large, busy terminal like O'Hare were just shut down, and even then, you couldn't get much. So, you didn't have any food on the airline, so you're starving. I already ate all my carry-on food on the flight, and it was pretty limited, and even now with everything back open, things have gotten pretty expensive like everything else for a meal.
Yeah, and then if you're in one of those satellite terminals, like terminal
Oh,
E or
Concourse
G
F
or
or
something,
Z.
concourse. Yeah, exactly. In an O'Hare, there's even less food places available, and you go buy a slice of pizza, and that's like $13.
I once paid $20 for a bag of nuts because that was really all I could do. I was in a huge hurry. I'm sure that's happened to everybody where you're definitely thinking, "Wow, this is why I do carry on because it is so expensive."
Yeah, yeah, I'm glad you mentioned delay or running out of time because sometimes you go order like McDonald's or Starbucks in the morning. There's a long line of people waiting, and if you have a short connection or if you showed up late, there are times when people pay for it, they wait, and then they go on not having any food.
Yes, and who wants to take a 16-ounce, gigantic coffee that you haven't even drank onto the airline? It is pretty cumbersome to actually have to try to carry
You're gonna
anything
spill
on,
it on your
especially
lap anyway,
liquids.
so.
Oh, yeah, yeah, there's been many times, but I've learned not to, run down a terminal trying to catch a flight carrying a big cup of coffee. Just don't ask me why.
Yeah, well, it's not a good thing to do. And as a vegetarian, I it's even a bigger struggle because you're confined to what you can find. There are more like salad places coming up in airport terminal, but it's far and few. There's a lot more Burger Kings and McDonald's compared to salad places.
It's definitely hard to eat healthy, in any kind of travel mode. That's where you have very limited choices because you're right, a lot of it is fast food these days.
Yeah, so we try to pack to the extent that we can, bring some food. Of course, you don't want to take some smelly food and open it up in the airplane, and then everybody else is like looking at you with that evil eye. You know what I'm talking about, right? That evil eye they look at
That's
you.
that's why I wondered about the burritos, but definitely no tuna fish sandwiches. Definitely not tuna fish.
Yeah, no, they had no tuna fish sandwich. So everybody will be like looking at you, either because they're hungry or they think you're weird.
Maybe it looked like a really good tuna fish sandwich, and you don't wanna tease people either, I suppose, if you have something really good.
Yeah, we travel a lot, so we get very discreet in how what we take, how we eat, and it's become an art and science by itself.
We could share tips on that, and I think that the airline pilots also are often found eating in the airline terminals, and so when we asked around, we found that it is definitely hard for them to keep healthy. They run through the same problems with possibly trying to take their own food and running out.
Let's talk about that in the next segment. Speaking of airline pilots, other than the ones that are flying this fancy international routes and get catered meals, many of the airline pilots, believe it or not, go through the same food conundrum that you and I go through as passengers.
Yes, when you're walking through the terminal or waiting in line for food, you've probably noticed that there's a good number of airline pilots also waiting in line, eating their lunches in the terminal. So they're not too much better off in most cases.
But I think what makes it difficult for them is the turnaround time or the connection time for them is very close. I think airlines, anytime they are parked at the gate, they're losing money. So they want to be up in the air flying. So they try to make these turnarounds very quick. And that means that pilots and the flight crew, including flight attendants, are getting less and less time. So previously we talked about having to wait long lines in Starbucks and McDonald's in the morning. The pilots sometimes have to wait in the same line. Maybe they get a little bit shortcut, I'm not sure, but there are times where it's just they cannot afford to wait because they don't want to be the reason for delaying an airplane flight.
Yeah, I actually feel bad when I see a airline crew because they're walking around in full uniform, sometimes taking all of their luggage, checking their phone to see what's the latest on their schedule, and they may be out of time. I've often offered my place in line just to make sure they can get on their way, and a lot of them are very appreciative.
My understanding is that they do get discounts at the airport places, like an employee discount, but still, this is not only about money, it's also about the time that they don't have. A couple of the pilots we talked to, airline pilots, said that it is very difficult to find healthy, good, decent food when they have a, jam-packed duty day.
Yeah, the ones who are, really hardcore, see that a lot of them will say, "Okay, I'll fill a lunchbox with anything I can pick up along the way." You learn to kind of ration your food, try to save it because even though you know your schedule, you could end up with a delay or a breakdown, and then you could be a long ways from the hotel you're supposed to go to for the night where you will be in a hotel restaurant having, a meal that may not be ideal.
Yeah, one pilot we talked to particularly said he has one meal, one proper meal, if you will, per day, and usually it's in the evening at the hotel or the restaurant. The rest of time he has his packed meals. Maybe it's a juice box, maybe it's sandwiches, maybe is whatever cut meat that he would carry in a little lunchbox, just like a school kid would, and that's becomes his food during the day, and then have one square meal at the end of the day.
I wish I could go on just one large meal a day, but I'm one of those people who has to eat something every couple of hours. I'm more of a grazer because I seem to do better that way. So I'm constantly carrying food around when I'm traveling.
Yeah, so I I honestly, I learned a lot by talking to pilots about this because I wasn't completely aware of how jam packed their schedules are, how back to back, just like you and I are trying to catch make a short connection, they are making short connections every time because they're not getting paid to sit in an airport terminal reading a newspaper. So therefore they have to go land, go to the next place. And by the way, unlike us as passengers, they have to go do a pre-flight, they have to do checks, they have to, set up their flight plans and all those things.
Yeah, things are really tight. You either have too much time to kill, and here you are at a terminal. Even though the crews have rest quarters, it's not ideal, or they are just back to back to back. And we also talked to people who fly for business and charter. Those schedules can be completely unpredictable, where you think you're leaving at noon, and you may have a lunch, or you may have called on your lunch app to have something delivered, and oh, we're an hour early. We're going now, and you leave your food behind, and off you go. So the tips that they offered are always have something on your own. Do not depend on that next meal when you have such an unpredictable schedule. So compared to airline pilots, you can have people who have no idea what they're doing in the next couple hours. It could be okay, you're delayed. You've got all the time in the world, or nope, we're leaving right now, and you've got to have something. And it's definitely important to stay fed and hydrated when you're out there actually flying passengers around.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up hydration because that's another common theme that several people we talked to mentioned is that food is one thing, but hydration is another. That means that you must have water or your minerals because you're up in the flight levels all the time, and so your body is consuming all this minerals and salts, and therefore you need to have electrolytes and water. And it's very easy and tempting to get into bad habits, right? Whether if it's drinking soda or a lot of sugar or eating a lot of processed food, eating a lot of pizza, and that cannot be good in the long run.
Now, just like anyone who travels or anyone in the transportation business, there are any number of jobs, drivers, truck drivers, and that will include pilots who fly on demand or on the airlines. It is really hard to eat healthy because all that's in front of you, that's available quick, is usually fast food that isn't healthy.
So it's an interesting contrast here, right, Elaine? For the airline pilots, they start their day and they have their 8 hour day or whatever, and they're usually jam packed, so they don't have enough time to even take a breath, let alone go get a food. But the corporate pilots, the private jet pilots, they are a little bit on a beck and call of the owners or whoever they're flying. So they can just say, okay, well, I'm going to go to town and get go to a restaurant and come back, because when the owner comes back and you have to go, you have to go.
Yes, anything on demand, charter, business, etcetera, where we talked about the unpredictable schedule. A couple of them wrote into me and said, what's really funny, and we're all guilty of this, is that when they do have a lot of time, they end up going to the fast food drive-through, even though they have 2 hours to find maybe a better place. So it apparently some of these pilots are completely hooked on junk food and they can't get away from it no matter what. So maybe they're in a better place because they're blissfully unaware that they don't have to change their diet depending on the time. And so they've gotten used to that lifestyle. And in the end, we'll see how long they last. But we've got the full spectrum there from our pilots.
Yeah, it cannot be good for them in the long run.
No.
We didn't specifically talk to them about exercise and staying healthy, but that's got to be factored in, because if they don't have time to eat properly, even eat regularly, let alone eating the right stuff, that means that they don't have time to exercise or keep fit, and that becomes a chore in itself. I mean, there are some very maniacal exercise health conscious people who make sure that they get up at 3 in the morning and hit the gym in the hotel. But many other people, it's kind of hard to do.
Yes, picture people who have jobs at home that they commute to, and picture going to eat out for every meal of the day. That can be the life of some pilots, where if given no other opportunities, you're eating breakfast, lunch, dinner, snacks, or any of the meals you choose to eat out all day long. Picture doing that, and you may not last a week, more than a week like that. People do get tired of it. I also got some notes from airline pilots for when they do have their days off, which is usually several days at a time. They don't want to go out to eat. They don't want to have anything bad for them. They are trying to literally detox and eat healthy home cooked meals at home. So for some, it can be a relief to get home and actually have a healthy diet.
Yeah, when we talked to Doug in a previous episode, he talked about that. He's
Hmm.
on a 15-day on, 15-day off schedule, and it's almost like leading two lives. You have the flying life, and then you have a home life. When you're home, you don't want to go anywhere. You don't want to talk to anybody. You don't want to eat anything outside.
Yeah, and the apps, I don't know if the phone apps have made that better or worse, because even though you can get so many more things delivered right to you and fairly timely, and you can time these out, and hopefully you're lucky and your flight isn't early, where you can pick that up. I don't know that people are actually finding healthier choices that way, but at least they have options.
I wonder if Uber Eats and DoorDash deliver to airplane cockpits.
I have seen that done. I have seen that done where they're walking out onto the ramp, usually with the somewhat a ramp escort, but or they'll pass these giant boxes and bags or wheeling catering out to the aircrafts, especially when time is tight. And so they do make it happen. If you don't have to leave your food behind, they'll get it out to you one way or another.
Interesting. So in the next segment, let's talk about what do private pilots, the general aviation pilots, do.
So, for those of us who fly for fun, fly for personal travel, and Gopal, you and I are also flight instructors, so we do quite a bit of light aircraft flying, either alone or with people. We also have the same problem of you're out there all day traveling, or you're working flight to flight. What can you eat?
Yeah, I was thinking about this. I There is one big difference I can think of, right? So if you're flying airline as a passenger or as a pilot, You are in big airports, and big airports have concourses and food courts and restaurants. But most of the places that we fly to are small, medium sized airports without any restaurant, right? In most of the places, the best you can do is a vending machine with Cheetos. But and some of these places are not near a town, or they're like several miles from a town. So I think the first challenge or first difference is that the kind of places we go to are not necessarily conducive to having, food court
Yeah,
food.
yeah. So we talked about flying light airplanes. You're going to airports, and sometimes you're seeking out those places. Sometimes it's a fly-in event, or sometimes there's a restaurant right on the field. Pilots love that stuff. They love to go fly to eat. But there are times when you'll land at an airport for gas, and like you said, there's maybe coffee available. Airports know that pilots love coffee, but, vending machines, maybe not. Sometimes you can't even get, an Uber Eat or a DoorDash because you're in a small town.
Yeah, and small town and airports tend to be far away from the town. So the nearest town center may be 3, 4 miles away. And if you don't have a courtesy car or some way of getting there, your options are limited. So, as general aviation pilots, as private pilots, we learn to deal with this. Thankfully, many of our trips are shorter durations. We're not like airline pilots traveling for 8 hours, 10 hours a day, although it does happen if you're working with clients or students on long distance flights. But usually it's few hours somewhere and then back.
Yes, I started out, as a full-time flight instructor, and so you were even though you weren't flying every minute of the day, you were very busy for 8 to 12 hours a day, back to back with, students and introductory flights and ground classes, and so you learn that, well, not only do you not have the time to run out and go through even fast food drive-through, which I try not to do, you have to have food on hand with you. Otherwise, you're just going to be eating Cheetos all day and you may not even have time for that. By the way, Cheetos is not a good thing to carry in a small airplane. We'll talk about picking foods for lack of messiness. And so I have learned that peanut butter and cheese sandwiches, a lot of my clients make fun of me because they see me walking around with a peanut butter sandwich are, uh, are the way to go, especially when you have that 5 minutes on the ground to, have a snack before you go out for the next few hours, so you figure things out.
You mean you don't like sticky orange Cheetos goo all over
No,
the
no,
flight
and
open
it's
flight controls?
also peanut butter sandwiches. Notice I did not say peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. Anything that can spill, stain, sticky, messy, you cannot have a lot of things like that, like chocolate, caramel, so you even have to
So
watch.
as general aviation pilots, you're sitting in smaller cockpits. The space is very tight, right? So you over the time you learn to bring food that is more flying conducive, shall I say. It's kind of like if you're eating while driving. If you have a bowl of pasta, it's not possible to eat that because you need to put the fork in. Sandwiches, burritos, these kind of things are easier to eat. So as pilots, we get used to what kind of food is easier to eat. The good news is some of the airplanes, especially the ones that I fly, some of the higher end planes, if they have autopilot, at least you can put it on autopilot and have a food or a few bites to eat. But if you're flying one of those older planes like the ones that you do, Elaine, is that you can't even let go of the controls.
No, if you if you're and I've ferried long ways, hundreds of miles without an autopilot, and you figure out ways to eat because it's inevitable. You could be up there for your full fuel range, 3 to even 4 hours, and so it's the dry sandwiches, granola bars that don't have any chocolate, and even then, just anything you can hold in your hand, anything that's not perishable. You really can't, carry ice along with you most of the time, so anything that can hold up to all kinds of temperatures, you just learn to carry those around, and you actually have to pre-pack. I have always run out of food, even though I feel like I'm, more than well prepared. Things always take longer than you expect, or you end up missing meals.
Yeah, so I always carry my water bottle, whether, no matter where I am, especially in the cockpit. It's very easy to get dehydrated We talked a little bit about the airline pilots, but in a small plane, same thing happens. It's very easy to get dehydrated. So keeping it hydrated, especially in warm days, is very tricky. So I have this water bottle with me all the time. I'm also reasonably health conscious person. So I just came back, Elaine, from a trip with a client. We flew in and out of Asheville, North Carolina, 1 day trip. We left at 6 a.m. We were back at like 7 p.m. So
Wow,
it's a day trip,
long
about
day.
3.5 hours out, couple hours out there, and then 3.5 hours back. And I had a box of strawberries and blueberries that I could pick and eat. I had a Ziploc bag of dry nuts, almonds and pecans and macadamia, that kind of stuff, and sandwich. Those were perfect. And then protein shakes that I like to drink. So those work out very well. So every one of us learns what we prefer and find the best way to take it without making a mess in an airplane.
Yes, there are pilots out there who will take the trouble to develop a system. I've also learned to carry my own little airline style cooler with an actual real fork and a real spoon because traveling so much, I just got tired of eating out of to go containers. And some of my colleagues laugh at me about that and say, hey, this is way better than either a messy drive through or hey, I actually somebody gave me something to eat and I had nothing to eat it with. So you figure out all those things just from trial and error.
Yeah, good point. People who don't fly in small airplanes may not realize this, but we don't really have beverage holders and cup holders and places, convenient place to put it. It's a very tight space. So you have to be very conscious. If you brought that bag, not only there's no place to put it in the front, and if you have it in the back, reaching when you have like seatbelts on while flying, that's also a tricky part. So you have to also know where to put the food so you can retrieve it on time.
Yeah, some of the newer airplanes they don't you fly come with cup holders, but there's still very limited space to have a meal. And so I try to treat it like if you have to have a snack on a long flight, that's okay. But you can have the food that's maybe more of a real meal when you land on the ground. And there's nothing wrong with having that at an airport and going off to fly the next leg with a couple of granola bars. So you really do learn how to come up with a system, especially if you want to eat healthy. I love the idea of blueberries. I'll try that next time. Although I want to make sure I don't smash those around when I'm
Yeah,
flying
don't
either.
drop them. And is it just me, or is it a Murphy law that anytime I take a bite is when the air traffic controller wants to talk to me?
Oh, you mean you're
And then
actually
I go boom,
flying
boom, boom,
and
boom, boom,
talking
boom,
on the
like that?
radio while you're eating? Wow, you don't have an
Yeah,
I
that's
you fly with other pilots, I suppose, you can switch off eating and working the radios because that would be really hard to do even with an
yeah. So
autopilot.
there's again people who are not familiar. There's a microphone boom right in front. So you have to remove this, and then you have mouthful of food that you're trying to talk, and then if the air traffic controller is talking to you, you have to respond. It's a little sticky situation, let's say.
That's great. I actually try not to eat more than a granola bar if I have to handle the radios. But you're right. It's inevitable. And with the microphones, it's sometimes great when you can have another pilot that you're sharing the flight with, or a client who can handle the flight, because then you can take a break and eat something and take turns. There's a lot of fun in that actually, because I've had many meals in a small 2 or 4 seat airplane, believe it or not, just out of necessity, because sometimes you don't have that leisure to just stop for a couple hours. You have to keep going. A
Yeah,
lot like
I've
airline
flown my
pilots,
fair.
actually.
Yeah, and I've flown my fair share of long distance, several hours, all the way from West Coast to Midwest. And like I said, we just did a day trip to Asheville, and then last month I did a day trip to the East Coast. You really develop a system, and it takes you a while to develop a system because you just don't know. And it helps if you're flying the same plane or similar planes because then your system works. If you're jumping from different kinds of plane, that kind of messes up things too.
Yeah, I've seen that a lot of pilots, almost all of them have at least a couple of granola bars in their backpacks because they know they could end up maybe having to divert to an airport with no services, and it's great to have that water bottle and a couple of bars in case you're stranded for a couple of hours. So I think everybody's learned if they've done any amount of flying that it helps to have something. And we all laugh about not having chocolate bars because those are the worst, especially in the summer.
We are curious about your tales of eating while traveling. Would you please share with us in the comments?
This is